something.
All right. Well, I mean, I know I'm excited. We knew that this was going to be a topic of interest, and just so you know, that the turnout's actually been really amazing. So a couple of house cleaning things just before we get started, so that and we'll just jump right in. So we've clarified that everyone can hear us loud and clear, and that the video is coming through. So just a quick note: if you guys have any questions at any point during the talk, we're planning on running about 45 minutes, but we'll save some time to answer some questions. Just fire them over at any time via the question box that you guys just let us know through. And also, with regard to anyone who's looking for a recording of this today, for attendees, we'll get that out to you guys within one business day. So without taking up any more time, Chris, I'm sure everyone's eager to get started. So welcome. Advertising isn't dead, just woefully overfunded. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce Chris Nealand.
I'll pause for the applause and allow everybody to return to their seats from that standing ovation. Thank you for the intro there, Brad, and thank you for those who are able to join us here this morning. This is brand new content for us. We've been doing some research. It's certainly a topic that we've been talking about for years, but we think we've got some further proof points and some interesting insights and some up-to-date industry research of executives from branding firms across North America that we're excited to share with you. I'm going to be doing most of the heavy lifting here for the next 40 minutes or so. Your job is really just to listen, and if you're feeling particularly ambitious, maybe you might want to take some notes. But I am going to ask you to participate here right at the very beginning and help me do something, because I hope it's going to punctuate the points that I'm going to try to make later on in the presentation. So if you will please grab a pen and a piece of paper, or if you're in a conference room, jump up to the whiteboard, and I want you guys to very quickly answer 3 questions. The first question is in a sentence or less. I want you to write down your definition of marketing. How do you think that not necessarily the Webster's Dictionary, but how would marketing professionals, how would perhaps your CEO define marketing? I'll pause for a second as you think about that. I was able to do it in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 words. So try to keep 10 words, 12 words or less kind of a thing. Second piece of homework here is to write down, what do you think that your company's marketing department spends the most money on? Maybe you can write down a few things that you think would consume the lion's share of your marketing budget. And then finally, I want you to get very personal and think about, when you go to work each day, what 2 or 3 things do you think that you are held most responsible for? Now, I think we have business leaders like CEOs. We have certainly mostly marketing department people, but I know we also have some people from HR that would be on the call. That's okay. I think about, regardless of your role, how you think your company thinks of marketing, regardless of your role, what you would guess the biggest expenses are, but then very specific to your role, what are you paid to do for your company, and what do you spend the majority of your time? What skill set would you say you bring to bear the most? I think they're now literally grinding coffee beans behind me, so I hope that you can hear me over the whirl of the noise. All right, so keep that piece of paper or that whiteboard handy as we now have a dialogue, and we're going to revisit some of these points in a few moments. When I think about the early days of us forming some hypotheses about marketing, we decided to write this book called Fix. And when we got our first draft done, we sent a copy of it, just an electronic version of it, to about a dozen industry insiders, people that we really respected their opinions, and we just asked them for help to see if they could make the book better. And I vividly recall that one of the guys that we sent a draft of the book to replied via an email with this very pithy, short comment that said, hey guys, the world doesn't need another book that is claiming that advertising is dead. Hundreds of those books have already been written. Now that was some tough feedback to hear, because frankly, we didn't think that our book was about ad bashing. Cult's point of view is not anti-advertising. Frankly, we help lots of clients do better advertising. But evidently in our zeal to expose some of the fundamental flaws within the marketing industry, we were coming across too bullish against ads. So we decided to make some edits per some of the feedback that we received, and then we published what we published. But still, to this day, we are too often accused of hating advertising. And so I want to take an opportunity to clarify what Cult's position truly is in regards to the role of advertising. If you were to Google today the question, is advertising dead? You would find nearly 90 million articles, blogs, PhD theses about this very subject. The overall health of the advertising business is a hotly debated topic in trade journals and in industry conferences. I was just forwarded an article this morning from Ad Age on this very subject. There is no universal consensus. Media publishers, ad agency insiders are still claiming that the industry is as strong as ever. Other credible marketing minds are bemoaning the fact that advertising is dying a slow and painful death. So at Cult, where do we stand? We believe that the ad agency model is in fact archaic and beyond repair. We are not fans of the agency model, but the actual act of advertising as a craft, is absolutely here to stay. Brands will always need ways to communicate compelling messages to their target audiences, and consumers will always accept a certain amount of ad interruption if it means that they can get free or lower cost access to the content that they actually want to consume. Believe it or not, we also know that consumers sometimes even enjoy ads. I know people who have requested IKEA's catalog. I know people who have opted in for Victoria's Secret's emails. I know people that watch the Super Bowl solely because of the commercials. I'll even admit here and now that I once voluntarily, on my own free will and choice, clicked on a banner ad displayed to me on Facebook. So consumers don't hate advertising. They accept it when used appropriately. That does not mean that all is well in ad land. We believe that there is absolutely an awakening of sorts, or a recalibration that is happening amongst enlightened brand leaders who are starting to ask a different question. Rather than debating the viability of the craft, some brand leaders are now simply wondering how little advertising can my brand get away with? Now, this question is perhaps a bit scary for people who make a living in ad-related disciplines, but this truly is a better question. Consider that no business owner started their company because they wanted to advertise. Rather, they wanted to manufacture or sell a really great product or service. They wanted to engage customers in really meaningful ways. Yet somewhere along that journey, that business life cycle, someone convinced them that if they advertised, they could sell more stuff. And in some cases, that was absolutely true. But there are several negative consequences to that behavior that too often get neglected. Let's talk about some of those. The first is that the correlation between ad spending and sales isn't consistent. Worse, it diminishes over time. Therefore, frequent advertising and sales promotions are not a viable long-term strategy. Unfortunately, too many brands, they no longer consider advertising the necessary evil that it is. Rather than relying on it occasionally to help them do temporary things like launch a new product or maybe move out some clearance items, they choose instead to overdose on it. And they're doing it almost weekly. And even worse, they're priding themselves on their advertising prowess. You know, the ad industry as an industry awards itself more than any other industry, even more than Hollywood. You know, hand in glove with advertising come sales promotions, because it's the sales that's really the content that frequently fills up our print media flyers and our radio spots. Fortune magazine wrote a really fascinating article last year, specifically blasting the retail sector. Excuse me. The retail sector was as an industry at large was experiencing had just ended its 7th quarter of disappointing stock performance and largely missing Wall Street's expectations. The authors of this Fortune article reasoned that one of the culprits behind retail's overall failure was something that they labeled death by discount. The article referenced how many retailers are now selling the majority of their products at steep discounts, oftentimes more than 50% off. It would be a fascinating exercise to work with your CFO to determine what percentage of your product is actually bought on sale and at what discount. Advertising discounts is not a sustainable way to grow sales. As such, advertising should never be considered a core business competence. If you have an entire marketing department or an entire agency relationship dedicated to helping you sell things that wouldn't otherwise sell on their own merits, but you have to discount it or scream that it's here, then we believe as an organization that you're completely missing the point about what real marketing is truly about, which would be to never have to do those short-term emergency measures of trying to move out some unsold inventory. The second thing that businesses fail to properly account for is the actual cost of this bad behavior. Too often, they only calculate the media cost required to promote the ads, and occasionally they'll consider also the cost to physically produce the ads. But fully loaded ROI really requires that we properly account for the huge hits to the margin, as well as the incremental demand on labor to facilitate the sales, as well as any third-party fees paid to concept and develop the campaigns. And then if you're really good at math, you'd start to calculate the opportunity cost associated with discounting sales for people that were going to come in and purchase at full price anyway, as well as the long-term impact of conditioning consumers to expect more markdowns from you in the future. I mean, just ask the folks at JCPenney's about that, right? They literally tried to take away some discounts after years of improperly conditioning their consumers with various ad stimuli, and their consumers literally revolted. They lost over $4 billion in 1 year because their consumers demanded that level of advertising that was resulting from the addiction that they had formed from the marketing behavior. If you look at this chart, the third thing that drives me crazy is that most marketing budgets are now devoted to paid media strategies. This chart shows how hundreds of global business leaders said that they were going to spend their marketing budgets in 2015. Look at all the greens. Look at all the double-digit increases to the green, right? This over-expenditure is completely irrational because as a whole, increased spending on paid media perfectly correlates with macro business metrics that show firms are now failing faster than ever before and that their customer engagement metrics are at all-time lows. So relying on mass media to grow your business is like the equivalent of taking an aspirin to fix a broken bone. It might do something to help with the pain, but it does nothing to heal the actual problems that are hurting your brand. So marketers' overdependence on paid media is a growing concern that I don't believe enough business leaders are having enough candid conversations about. So really the intention of our book and the intention of this webinar and the intention of the things that we speak about is to start a dialogue. Let me give you some interesting facts, at least interesting to us. In the fall of 2014, the Washington Post reported that for the first time in 30 years, the number of business deaths outnumbered the number of business births. So this is significant because something about marketplace dynamics has changed, and it is resulting in unfavorable business performance. That same fall that the Washington Post wrote that article, a congressional hearing was held in the U.S., and it was devoted entirely to understanding the business conditions, the business environment of America. And the main finding was that new companies are going out of business more quickly than ever before, and the firms that actually do succeed are growing slower than ever before. Other economic data proves that the average lifespan of a publicly traded company has now decreased from what used to be 50 years in the mid-1900s to now just 15 years. Clearly, the rules of engagement supporting sustainable commerce are not working like they used to. And our hypothesis is that this is due largely to business leaders adopting an unholy dependence upon advertising to mask substantive shortcomings to their actual value propositions. We are fixing symptoms, not problems. Contrast this decline in successful business ventures with the radical overinvestment in mass advertising. Since the early 2000s, global spending on media has risen at a compounded annual growth rate of 5.1%. It is estimated to grow even faster and to reach $2.1 trillion by 2019. Ad spending from the 100 largest American advertisers has increased by 4.6% on average per year since 2010. Yet, the U.S.'s actual economic growth rate, if you measure that by gross domestic product, GDP, indicates that consumer spending is growing less than 3% per year. So that means that brands have decided to overspend on advertising 50% faster than Americans are willing to even buy the goods and services that are being promoted. So clearly, businesses' attempt to beg you to purchase something via paid media is not working. I believe that better business performance requires us to rethink our marketing playbooks, to change our corporate cultures, so that we become more committed to creating customer advocates than we are creating clever ads. And I can think of two big ways that marketers can immediately start this course correction. First, marketers must stop being distracted by the efficient instead of the effective. Okay, let's elaborate on that. What do I mean by the efficient versus the effective? The metaphor that I'll draw here is the perils of distracted driving. By this point, most states and most provinces have laws to keep people focused on doing the things that matter most when driving a vehicle, which is largely watching the road, watching the cars around you, and staying in your lane. Unfortunately, there is no law to prevent distracted marketing. And that's really a shame because given all the dramatic changes to the discipline over the past 10 years, when you consider the amount of channels and activities that demand a marketer's attention, It is simply overwhelming. Grasping the changes within the media landscape alone would be enough to keep everybody busy. But then you have to consider advancements in technology and combine that with trying to understand the implications of today's new empowered consumer, and any given marketer's daily to-do list is overly cluttered and overly complex. Most marketers are either totally stressed out because they're trying to do everything, or they're paranoid and they're guilt-riddled because they can't keep up. In an understandable act of self-preservation, marketers have sought time-saving solutions, and third-party publishers and media buying agencies have been especially quick to provide them. The outcome is that we now have a multi-billion-dollar industry that is dedicated to helping brands buy mass media, where the emphasis is more about efficiencies than effectiveness. Aside from my own personal interactions with media buyers who have confessed to the reality that their job is to buy the most eyeballs for the lowest possible cost and the least amount of time possible, I'm going to share with you a few examples that further prove my point. If you study where brands' ad dollars are actually being deployed, there is shockingly little accountability for the excessive expenditures in various channels. So, for example, this is an eMarketer study of ad spending by medium between 2010 and 2014. It reveals a significant jump in magazine and newspaper ad spending. Yet that same eMarketer company did a different study that revealed consumer engagement with magazines and newspapers is at all-time lows. The Pew Research Foundation said that the consumer magazine industry experienced another difficult year in 2014. Overall circulation declined for the 7th year in a row, and things were particularly bad for newsstand sales, which fell 14%. Consider TV advertising. Due to DVRs as well as multi-screen, multitasking behavior, metrics measuring the percentages of ads that were fully viewed, it's decreased from over 90% in the early 1990s to now less than 20% in 2012. Yet the cost of TV advertising rose sharply during that same time period. And in the past 15 years, the average CPMs for something like primetime TV has increased by over 85%. Why do marketers seem content paying more for media that is delivering significantly less than it ever has before? This reminds me of that the movie The Big Short, where there's this radical miscalibration of a calculation of what home values actually are for this inflated marketplace where irrational behavior has created something that is just completely unsustainable and unjustifiable. We believe at Cult that media houses and print publishers have simply made marketing so easy. So the efficiency now trumps the effectiveness for most brands. And this is just in the traditional sense. The story is actually much worse in the digital world. I don't know if anybody knows this guy. This is a guy named Bob Hoffman. He was the former CEO of a successful ad agency based out of San Francisco called Hoffman Lewis. His agency worked with notable brands like Toyota, McDonald's, Maytag appliances. After 22 years in the industry, he's now retired, and people refer to him as the ad contrarian because he is now making quite a name for himself by critiquing the ad business. Personally, I love when industry insiders become whistleblowers of sorts, and they help open our eyes to some unpleasant realities. He wrote a book called Marketers Are From Mars and Consumers Are From New Jersey. And in that, he really kind of expands upon this delusional state that today's marketers are in. And then he recently gave a speech in London where this is what he had to say. He said, "Marketers are pouring more and more money into online advertising. They don't know what they're buying. They don't know who they're buying it from. They don't know what they're getting, and they don't know how much they're paying. It's sort of a damning indication of what he saw from his time in the ad world. In our opinion, the poster child where efficiency has trumped effectiveness is in something called programmatic online media buying. The macro trends in North America towards programmatic buying is mind-bogglingly problematic to us because it now accounts for more than half of all of the North American digital display ads that we see and that brands buy. There have been numerous concerns raised about programmatic media buying, but the most disturbing is that of blatant fraud. In an article about programmatic following a summit that they had hosted, an agency called Digiday identified that fraud is one of programmatic's biggest challenges for brands, for agencies, and for publishers. There's a guy named Zachary Weiner, who is the CEO of Emerging Insider Communications, who wrote that programmatic advertising fraud is generated by non-human traffic called botnets and traffic exchanges, which allow impressions to be stolen from innocent computers while you're sleeping, or they're set up in some sort of a black market peer-to-peer system where fraudulent impressions are generated in a network of willing conspirators. Without transparency, it is becoming increasingly difficult to weed out fraudulent impressions and clicks from the legitimate ones, which means that companies are paying for digital media that is fraught with lies. A New York Times article states Vindico, which is an ad management platform, deemed that 57% of the 2 billion video ads that they send out over a 2-month period were actually unviewable. More than half of them ran without ever being seen by a human being. The other half were on ads displayed below the viewable area of a screen, but were counted as impressions. And these metrics are on top of other disturbing survey data revealing a thing called banner ad blindness, which is a new terminology referring to consumers that have learned to just completely tune out banner ads. And other data suggests that if they actually do see your banner ads, if the same ads are displayed more than 5 times, so this behavioral idea of following me around the internet and doing some ad serving based on sites I previously had visited, if you now follow me around and display the same ad, I'm more likely to dislike your brand than to actually like you. So while marketers think they're helping themselves by showing these ads, they're actually damaging their brand affinity. Another contributing factor to marketers being distracted with efficiency versus effectiveness is a heightened emphasis on media mix optimization models. Now that's not intuitive because most people are sold these models because they want to be more effective. Colt is a fan of using data to make more informed decisions, but we're concerned about the false sense of security that these expensive optimization models claim to provide. We know way too many marketers who are placing too much confidence in the model's outputs instead of applying some common sense and really challenging some of the media recommendations. We're even more bothered when we read statements like this from the Advertising Research Institute. They wrote, as consumers are in control of how they consume content and interact with brands more than ever, which we agree with, they then said understanding ad resonance across screens is the only way to successfully drive memorability and brand lift today. Now, that is a fundamentally false assertion. It is claiming that the only way to achieve brand lift is figuring out better media mix optimization. I think that brand leaders at Google, Facebook, Airbnb, Amazon, Lululemon, Costco, Harley-Davidson, Zappos, or even Spanx would all disagree because those category leaders have never relied on big, optimized paid media buys to create memorability or brand lift. I think of it like this analogy. Imagine a guy walks up to a woman in a bar, and instead of asking, hey, would you like to go out with me? Instead, he asks, hey, we're going out, so let me know which night works better for you, Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. You know, this guy knows that if he can distract her from wondering or thinking, do I even want to date this guy? And instead get her thinking, well, I have to choose Thursday, Friday, or Saturday night, well, then the guy wins because he asked a different question. And rather than her debating the validity of his offering, she just then shows what's the best of the three bad choices. Marketers need to proceed with more caution. Media mix optimization strategies can be used as subtle industry tricks designed to distract marketers from asking better questions, such as something like, what is our brand failing at that requires us to advertise so much? If brand leaders truly answered that question, then the majority of dollars that are currently earmarked for mass media would be redeployed into customer value propositions that actually impact sales. But the problem is most ad agencies don't know how to get paid if you're not advertising. Advertising professionals don't really care which media outlets that their clients use, just so long as they're using some of them. Agencies have gotten very good at learning how to make money. Art directors, copywriters, media buyers have all learned over this past decade how to adapt their craft from TV to online video, direct mail to email, website build development to social media strategies. So as long as you're doing some type of advertising, oftentimes recommended by their media mix models, then they'll make money. But paying your ad agencies should never be your marketing objective. I want to introduce you to a company that we are big fans of out of New York called Brand Keys. Brand Keys has been around for over 30 years, helping really understand what works and what doesn't work in the world of media spend. In the world of marketing spend, without this overemphasis on thinking of marketing as a proxy for media. They have no vested interest in the perpetuation of paid media, right? They don't have a dog in the fight. Their commissions or compensation has nothing to do with how you bring their strategies to life. Brand Keys declared a long time ago that awareness-based advertising is one of the longest roads to profitability that a brand can take. Each year, they survey tens of thousands of consumers across 72 different categories, and they paint a detailed picture of how the best brands are engaging customers and meeting their expectations. Their category winners are highly correlated with the most profitable brands in North America. Their category winners are also poorly correlated with the list of the top spending advertisers in North America. The other thing that I believe that marketers should begin to do to course correct their behavior is to really understand their evolving role in managing the entire customer experience. You know, improving the customer experience is being seen increasingly as a key competitive advantage in most boardrooms. It's very vogue right now. A recent survey of 478 marketing executives polled by the Economist magazine indicated that slightly more than 1/3 of marketers today admit to being responsible for managing the entire customer experience. However, the good news is that 75% of marketers say that over the next 3 to 5 years, they will become more responsible for the end-to-end experience throughout the customer's lifetime. That is exciting news because that is actually what marketers should have been doing this whole time. When we're not distracted by the allure and the sex appeal of clever mass advertising, we can begin to remember what our true job description is, and we can start to get refocused. Now, focusing on the entire customer experience involves two things. First, we need more stewardship over all the things that customers interact with. Websites, call centers, store associates, packaging, store environments, and even product development. Secondly, they need to change the perception of why they're at their firms. We looked at over 40 job postings for Fortune 100 companies that were looking for director or VP level marketing personnel. Unfortunately, 90% of those job descriptions dealt mostly with marketing communications management. That has to change. The other aspect of the customer experience is this very conscious shift away from acquisition-based marketing to retention-based marketing strategies. This is huge because it makes us rethink the kind of classic marketing paradigm of the purchase funnel. Some people have heard me harp on this before, but we have to understand that this purchase funnel framework was invented in 1898, right? It hasn't been modified since 1924. That's over almost a century ago. Since the early 60s, this purchase funnel framework has been used by old school brand marketers to help them make marketing decisions. And because awareness and familiarity are the first two steps of this paradigm, many businesses prioritize those marketing activities. In fact, they seem so important that most firms are spending more than 60% of their budgets on activities designed to drive awareness or familiarity, right? That involves not just paid media spend, but the amount of marketing personnel, the amount of agency dollars or agency relationships are also all kind of aimed at those first two steps of the funnel. That's a problem because we need to open our minds to this new reality. And this isn't cult talking. This is the Harvard Business School talking, where they went and did a bunch of research in 2010 and discovered that literally no aspect of the purchase funnel is actually true today. Right? They called the new marketing paradigm this loyalty loop, and you'll see how it prioritizes other critical customer decision points that are far more impactful than awareness. For example, it elevates the importance of inbound marketing and activities like content, including blogs and white papers, ratings and reviews, infographics and online videos, strategic partnerships, and enhanced customer service. The good news is that the same talented art directors and copywriters who you currently are paying to design your print ads, their jobs are still needed. They just need to be repurposed. They need to apply those skills to optimizing your website, improving your store experience, reimagining your product packaging, and creating your internal recruiting and training materials to further enhance your culture and your employee engagement. The other thing that we love about Harvard's model is its emphasis on post-purchase activities. That is where people form opinions about repeat purchase and referral. The original purchase funnel ended with purchase, which in hindsight is totally absurd. Research reveals that up to 40% of people's opinions about a brand just start to form after they actually buy and start to use your product or service. So cult brands really know that this is where their marketing efforts should be dialed up, and they should be spending their marketing resources transforming transactional customers into diehard converts who will never again consider a different alternative. Admittedly, to truly embrace the new loyalty loop reality requires significant changes, as most companies have to rethink their programs, their personnel, their processes, and we all admit that change can be hard. But change is also necessary. To really embrace this new loyalty loop reality, we need to rethink some things. Our team has consulted with hundreds of brands of all different shapes and sizes, and we conclude that in almost every case, way too much emphasis is placed on marketing communications, while the actual discipline of marketing is distressingly underutilized. What once was noble and dealt with meaningful pursuits, affectionately referred to as the 4 Ps, if you recall that from school, marketing now seems relegated to being largely devoted to shouting and bribing and begging and harassing. And there is no fulfillment in a job description doing those kinds of things if we truly call a spade a spade. All of our reckless behavior over the past 10 or 15 years has woefully damaged marketing's credibility as a discipline. According to a recent Ad Age study, marketers are now the lowest profession in regards to behaving with integrity. We score worse than previous winners that were politicians or lawyers, right? This negative sentiment seems to be based largely on the fact that we have just grown way too comfortable spending our time producing huge volumes of ads and touting a lot of irrelevance into the world. We are contributors to the noise. Another another executive survey of CEOs found that 78% of corporate leaders believe that marketers have lost sight of what their real job should be. They labeled it as they should be generating more consumer demand for their products or services in quantifiable and measurable ways. If that is truly true, and they want you to focus on creating consumer demand, we should all acknowledge that creating demand amongst existing customers is far easier and cheaper than creating demand amongst new ones. That means that advertising should only be pursued if there is any time, money, or energy left in your tanks after you've exhausted all of your efforts to create a cult-like status amongst those who have already chosen to do business with you. Now let me wrap up here on a high note. I have read 2 things recently that give me hope for a better future. I don't think that we are, as a marketing discipline, beyond repair. First, I have an opportunity to teach a marketing class at Mount Royal University in Calgary, Alberta. And I was pleased that when I got the textbook for this year, it was a new text, and it in the second paragraph on the first page of the text, it said, "We need to dispel the myth that promotion and marketing are one and the same. Often people believe that marketing revolves around slick commercials and fancy promotions. In fact, marketers' ultimate objective is to drive profits for a company or to generate revenue and support funding programs for nonprofits." I love that. I love the fact that a new generation of marketers are being properly trained. They're no longer being taught the outdated purchase funnel methodology. They're being taught to expect more from their careers because their job isn't just to craft words and pictures that will be displayed via media outlets, but rather to find meaningful ways to actually engage consumers. The second one is perhaps a bit more jarring because I think it's going to be done to us more than it's going to be done with us. And this is the fact that most C-suite executives believe that their marketing groups, as presently constituted, can't fix themselves. So they're going to intervene and fix it for you. The Economist did a survey of marketing of corporate executive CEOs, and it said that 80% of them admitted that they need to restructure marketing departments to better support their business going forward. 29% of those who said that they had a problem said that the need for change is urgent. So that means even if marketing practitioners, and particularly their supporting ad agencies, are being too slow to recognize the errors of their ways, corporate leaders appear willing to disrupt and to start demanding changes to their marketing people, their marketing processes, their programs, their promotions, everything. When pressed further about what kinds of changes these people want to make, the research suggests that they now need new marketing skill sets. 4 in 10 brand leaders want new blood in the areas of digital engagement and marketing operations and marketing technology. Another third state that they want to upgrade their talent in the areas of brand strategy and planning. That's interesting because it's showing anywhere from 30 to 50% of people demanding change want to change how they're behaving, not just what they're behaving. Meanwhile, hundreds of organizations are already tinkering with new organizational structures. So they're blowing up org charts and who reports to who and who's empowered to do what. They're trying to get more agility. They're trying to increase cross-functional cooperation, and they're trying to help their organization scale better. So please go back to the list that you wrote down at the beginning of this webinar. As you evaluate how you've thought about marketing, how your organization defines it, how you think about how your organization is spending its money, how you think about what you're doing each and every day that you go to work. Is there anything that causes you pause? Would anybody be willing to admit that they have cause for alarm, right? Have things gotten so bad? Has your organization gotten so distracted by its dependence upon advertising and promotions? Do you think that your daily job is too heavily skewed towards producing a seemingly endless cycle of markdowns and mass media buys? If so, if you see a disconnect between what you're doing and what hopefully I've convinced you the industry is saying needs to change, then we'd like you to think of this webinar as the first step of an intervention. We'd like to invite you to enroll in something that we call marketing rehab, very literally rehabilitation to help overcome some bad behaviors and to create some more positive, effective ones. Thanks to the world's most cult-like brands, we know exactly what healthy businesses and appropriate marketing behavior actually looks like. Elaborating on those practices is a topic for another day, another webinar, but just trust us when we tell you that many brands have already begun this journey of rethinking their marketing practices and more specifically redeploying their mass media dollars into activities that matter more. So we invite you to give serious consideration to how you're spending your time and how you're spending your company's money in an attempt to improve engagement amongst your customers, amongst your prospects, and amongst your employees. If you feel like you need some help, then please call us. That is literally why the Cult Collective exists. We would love to help you. And if you feel like you can do it on your own, we applaud your courage and we wish you the very best of luck in your personal and professional journeys. So with that, that sort of formally concludes our thesis, if you will, our provocative point of view, and would love now to open it up to some questions. If anybody has anything that they'd like me to elaborate on, I'd be happy to do so.
Perfect. Yeah. So guys, just going to jump in here. We went a couple of minutes over, but we do want to give you guys a platform to ask questions. So feel free to shoot them through the question box now, and we'll get Chris to attend to them quickly. I think one thing just to get started here, Chris, as you were doing the research for this topic, if you were to identify one or the most surprising insight, what would that be?
Well, like I said, I was heavily influenced by the disconnect of why are people continuing to pour so many dollars into it when what it actually delivers is unquestionably less. Like, I don't think we need to have a lot of research to prove to people that, American Idol used to attract 20 million viewers and now it attracts 6 million viewers, and yet the cost of those eyeballs goes up over a decade. So it's that irrationality that we had to try to understand. And then in many ways you'd say kudos to the publishers and the media buying agencies for diverting our attention, that while we're actually not getting as much as we used to, boy, they sure made it so easy. And, there is certainly a benefit to ease, but I don't think many people if they truly poked and looked at it, would say that they can just be efficient. They have to at some point be effective as well. And it was that disconnect that caused us to kind of get on our soapbox and say enough is enough.
Awesome. So, we've got a question coming out of San Francisco, Chris. What's the most common thing that your agency helps brands correct first?
Boy, I don't know that I'd say there's the most common. If you look at so we go into any brand and we try to just quickly assess of the 6 things that the world's most cult-like brands do, how well are you delivering on all 6 of those? One of those 6 things absolutely deals with the pervasiveness of your paid media strategies, and that's almost always where the most dollars are found to fund any of the other 5 recommendations. I bet you the people that did the exercise at the beginning of the webinar, when you wrote down where's most of the money go, there would be paid media things on there, retail flyers, print flyers if you're a retailer, or television advertising if you're in automotive, or direct mail if you're in financial services, right? So paid media becomes an easy way to find budgets so that you don't have to do things incrementally. This can be a zero-sum game just by spending some dollars differently rather than going back to the board or CEO and asking for additional dollars. But I think the other thing that we're always shocked at is how poorly the brands actually do anything that's of we call it remarkable, but it's just anything of note. I mean, there's just so much mediocrity now that most marketers' jobs have been just help us hawk the stuff that doesn't sell, right? And I love the quote from Steve Jobs that said when he was interviewing with the Nike guys, like, just stop making the stuff that sucks and just focus on the stuff that doesn't. And Nike and Apple are cult brands because they have the courage to actually do that, whereas most businesses are in the game of just making more stuff rather than better stuff.
Perfect. Yeah. So we've got two more questions, Chris, and then we're going to have to pull the trigger. So he wants to know, he says, I love the question, what is our brand doing wrong that requires so much advertising to draw guests to our brand? Have you had any experience socializing this thought inside of a company?
Yeah, I have. And I tell you, where it's the easiest conversation is when there's a new CMO or a new CEO that comes in because they have no vested interest in the mistakes of the past, right? Going to an incumbent CEO and trying to get them to acknowledge that maybe they've been wrong for the past several years is hard. Not impossible, but it requires a tremendous amount of professional maturity for somebody to say, I admit that there's been some mistakes and let's correct it now. I think most of the time we're brought in when a new CEO or a new CMO sits at their desk and they look at this and like, what the hell? Because they're not mired in the operational legacy of what got them to that place in the first point, and got to the point in the first place. And so, yeah, it's not easy, but it also can't be led by somebody whose personal motivations are, I need to spend more advertising dollars because that's just what I know how to do, or that's what I've been doing for a long time. It's got to be somebody that's truly motivated to say, what can we do to make this company great? And very rarely is that answer, I think we should advertise more.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so we've got one last one from Kelly. Chris, do you recommend spending any time or effort on gaining new customers, or do you think the greatest investment is all on loyalty of current customers?
No, I think this is why we're so frequently accused of hating advertising. We're just trying to swing the pendulum back to some place of normalcy. Absolutely, advertising has a time and a place, particularly in regards to new customer acquisition. It's just that the percentages are out of whack. So if that's where 60, 70, 80% of your marketing dollars are going, then you're out of balance. Harley Davidson spends 85% of their marketing after the purchase. So that's not 100. That still means there's 15% for paid media, and we ourselves have helped them do things on cinema and on online channels. So advertising absolutely can be effective, but we just have to do something, and oftentimes do something so blunt as to grab people by the coat lapels and say, shift it, over here. And I think sometimes in our bluntness it comes across as there should never be any. We're simply saying it shouldn't be the most.
All right, so one more question popped through, and we'll wrap it up right now. I think this one's pretty interesting, so I wanted to get it out there so everyone could hear. So a question out of Toronto, and if you could just sum up in one sentence, Chris, how I may be able to get my boss, the CMO, to redeploy ad dollars. Is there any piece of advice that you could give us to help get him to consider this bold move?
Yeah, I mean, that's really why I think so no, I can't do it in a sentence, but I can do it in a thought. And that's why we ended with this idea of marketing rehab. You can't frame the discussion as a media mix optimization or a media mix reallocation. Because at the end of the day, the media is simply a symptom of a bigger issue relating to culture, relating to investments, personnel, headcount, history, legacy metrics, etc. So we like to go into companies and frame it as maybe we should consider some marketing rehab. Maybe we should open our minds to the possibility that we're addicted to some harmful behaviors, and then we have to look at the problem holistically. The outcome will be a redeployment of how some dollars are spent, but that typically happens after we acknowledge under or over investments in other areas so that you have viable alternatives, right? The goal isn't just to turn the spigot off and not do anything. The goal is to redeploy those dollars into things that actually matter, and you can't frequently do that until you've got a competency around doing those things that actually matter.
Perfect. So, all right, that wraps it up for us. I appreciate everyone, or we appreciate everyone sticking it out with us, going a little bit over time. The recording will follow within the next full business day. Any of the questions that were sent through the question taskbar that didn't get answered will be answered offline, so watch for that. And if you guys had any other additional requests for information or conversations, feel free to reach out to me directly. My contact information will be in the follow-up email, and we can set up follow-up calls or communications. So just to sign off here with everyone, stay fearless, and looking forward to hosting you guys again on our next webinar coming soon. Thank you, Chris, and everyone have a great rest of your week.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Bye.